On today, we unveil another game based on the Quake 2 engine.
Kimberly, come in. Are you okay?
We got the power.
You are now listening to Retro Radio.
Welcome to another edition of Retro Radio, your only comprehensive online source for classic, arcade, and computer gaming emulation news and information. I'm Shane R. Monroe, your host. Welcome to the program. Well, folks, it seems like forever since we've had an episode of Retro Radio, so this one should be a good one. We don't have any interviews this time, but our next show will have the interview with David Foster. He's agreed to give us a phone interview. He, of course, is the genius behind re-releasing Dragon's Lair and Space Ace, which we should have a review of soon. We'll probably have another special edition episode to review Space Ace. Anyway, I haven't gotten to hear back from Buckner and Garcia. They were supposed to give me an interview, too, but it looks like old EMU Views beat me to it. Anyway, let's start off the show with my editorial commentary. Everything actually has been pretty quiet. IDSA hasn't shut any sites down. There hasn't been any real Nintendo news. Everything's been, I don't know, kind of quiet for a change. So, instead of me hammering on a company, I'm going to start hammering on people. And you know me, I'm not a vindictive kind of guy. I'm just an easygoing sort of dude. But there are a few people out in emulation land that have pissed me off, and that's what this rant's going to be about this episode. So who's pissed me off? Well, if you're thinking it's the guy over at Lard World, well, he's pissed me off too, but not as much as these other guys. I don't mind people making fun of me. No big deal. I'm used to it. I was a geek in high school and in junior high, and, you know, I'm used to being shamed. But a good friend of mine who's also done a lot for the emulation scene was the target of some nasty, vicious, amateur, childish, stupid, asinine idiots who thought it'd be more fun to poke fun at others than to actually contribute something to the scene. Unfortunately, these guys happen to be the bona fide representatives of the modern emulation clan. Now, you folks know I've been against modern emulation from the beginning. Okay, I do play NARC. No Neo Geo, no Capcom for me, please. Thank you, drive-through. But everybody asks me, you know, well, not everybody's like that. There are some people who are into modern emulation that aren't dweeby dickheads like these other guys are. And no, I'm not going to name them. That'll just give them more fuel for the fire. People like that seem to enjoy hearing their name and their site's name on my show. Well, it's not going to happen. You guys know who you are, and most of the people listening to this show is going to know who I'm talking about. Anyway, this group of modern emulation folks thought it'd be really fun to take this guy's picture of him and his wife was pregnant, so she had a tummy on her. She didn't look like she was regularly that way, just from a pregnancy sort of thing. Anyway, they thought it'd be cute to take the picture and stretch it out, amateurish, I might add. The least you could have done was use power goo or something that would have made it look right, and made her all fat. Then went on to nag on my buddy and call his wife a fat bitch or something like that. I can't remember what it was. I was so pissed when I read it. I wanted to about snap. Well, a lot of you guys know exactly who I'm talking about. Now, I want to interject something here. First of all, if it had been me you did that to, my lawyer would have been knocking on your ISP's door and your door for defamation of character. There's lawsuits won every day for it, and I guarantee you if your ISP had a knock on the door by Mr. Attorney that says we're going to sue the hell out of you if your people don't stop abusing and basically performing illegal acts. And trust me, these I think they were on some free GeoCities or Triplot or one of these other loser services. Trust me, those people will drop you without a second thought. And you're thinking, oh, yeah, well, we'll just move to another one. Well, guess what? The other one's going to drop you, too. And you can play hop around until there are no more free services. This sort of thing is uncalled for, people. You know, we're trying to project that the scene is harmless and that we're just out here having fun. We're not hurting anybody. We're not trying to steal royalties from anybody. We're trying to be a good group of people trying to enjoy some classic gaming, some other gaming. You people don't even have a place on my death list. That's how low you rank, okay? If I was going to create a death list, you wouldn't even make that because I don't have time for turd-nosed little snot punks like you that think Neo Geo and N64 are just the ultimate definition of gaming, okay? Now, I know there's a lot of you out there who like Neo Geo that don't fall into that category. But just when I start to think modern emulation might be okay after all, I get crap like this thrown right in my face that, quite frankly, revolts me. So, for those of you out there who are involved in spoofing's one thing, okay? Satire's one thing. I think it's really funny when you put up a Yahoo site that looks like Yahoo except for it's basically themed after something else, and you have a little bit of fun. That's what Lard World started off with Monroe World. But it's not funny anymore. And it's about the time, okay, you've had your fun. Now, how about getting off your dumb, lazy, stealing ass and do something of your own? Do something for yourself. Give back something to emulation instead of taking from it. That's why I started Insert Coin like 2 years ago, because I couldn't program, I couldn't contribute to the scene, I couldn't work on a MAME driver, so I decided instead to go out of my way and supply ROMs and try to keep an updated set. Now, this is long before all the MAME merges and stuff started happening. It was hard to keep a good set all the time, but it worked. I decided to give something back and contribute back to the scene. Now, I could have been a ROM linking, GeoCities using fool, but I didn't. People who do the spoofs and the satires obviously have far more time on their hands than we do. Those of us who are trying to contribute and actually give something back to the scene. Anyway, enough ranting. That's going to do it for my rant session. I'm just going to get all worked up, and I'm going to start spewing out obscenities, and then I'd be right down on the level that they're at. So, instead, let's go ahead and look at some updates with emulation as we know it today. Now, this show isn't on as often as it used to be. We used to do like a weekly show, and then it was bi-weekly. Now it's about once a month. And the reason for that is obviously, of course, I've been very, very busy, and it's very difficult for me to get a show out these days with all the other work I have to do. That also means that my news segment, my updates with the emulators, aren't exactly cutting edge anymore. It's not even the news at 10 anymore. It's like the news at 3 a.m. So instead of talking about what's out there, which you probably already read on Dave's Classics the day that came out, I would rather instead give you some background information, give you some insight about what's current in the news, give you something interesting to take home, as it were. The first thing I'd like to talk about is MAME. Now, I know I've kind of been neglectful of MAME lately, and I know I haven't probably given its due, but it's too big. It's too big for me to support, and I know what it was like when I was getting 150 emails a day. I couldn't do it. I certainly couldn't do it now. But in their defense, I would like to say something about the MAME team. You guys rock. Empire Strikes Back has been one of the most coveted, never could get it cracked and get it emulated sort of game. It's been that one that's been sticking in the burr in everybody's saddle. And the MAME team finally managed to crack the slapstick protection that was preventing Empire Strikes Back from being emulated. You guys rock. I'm sorry I haven't said it more frequently. We still don't have proper collision detection in front line, but at least we don't have another Neo Geo game. At least we're seeing something cool like Empire Strikes Back, and I'm glad that the MAME team hasn't forgotten about the classics. Now, for those of you who may not have been following along this whole Empire Strikes Back thing, a lot of you are saying, yeah, but Shane, it's Star Wars. I mean, it looks exactly like Star Wars. It's like the same engine. What's the big deal about having Empire Strikes Back emulated? Well, if you haven't been around the scene long, I can understand what your concerns are and what you're trying to say. Let me tell you something. The protection scheme, this slapstick is like a piece of hardware, okay? It's a piece of hardware that Atari came up with to prevent arcade owners from sharing the ROMs with the other arcade owners. Now, a lot of people have asked me in the past, and I've already answered it, so I won't go into great detail. What is it with the boot, Jutel, alt sets, the Donkey Kong running on scramble hardware, Pac-Man running on scramble hardware? What does all that mean? Well, what it basically boils down to is somebody took the Donkey Kong ROMs out of a real Donkey Kong machine and pirated them, made a copy of them, and gave it to somebody else who owned like a Scramble or a Pac-Man machine. They then took those ROMs and basically, because they were compatible, dropped them right into their Pac-Man machine. Well, now Pac-Man had a different color palette and a different set of sounds, but you could still play Donkey Kong on it, or on Scramble, which is like the most versatile hardware out there ever. I mean, you could play all sorts of things on Scramble hardware. Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, there's just tons of them, and there's jokes going around. In fact, it was so versatile, there are jokes going around that everything runs on Scramble hardware. Toaster runs on Scramble hardware, your N64 emulator runs on Scramble hardware. Of course, none of it's true, but it's still funny. Anyway, so Atari got sick of this, and they started incorporating a protection chip that had to run side by side with the game ROMs before the games would run. Now a lot of games like Gauntlet 2 had slapstick on it, but they were able to work around it. For some reason, the Empire Strikes Back slapstick was just different enough to where they couldn't quite get the hang of it. And now finally they have, and they finally got rid of that nasty slapstick protection. That also opens up probably some emulation issues for some other games, as well as perhaps giving us some performance increases on other games where slapstick was worked around versus emulated or bypassed. So that's very exciting. It's a big day. It's a big turning point for the main development and emulation in general. And hopefully they will be sharing that with the RetroCade and the Hive folks, and we'll be able to see Empire Strikes Back ported to those. As RetroCade already has Star Wars, it would be logical that without the slapstick that they could get Empire Strikes Back working as well. Now on to RetroCade. Gosh, folks, it's been dead. It's been dead on the mailing list. I think a lot of the guys are on vacation with their families, and they're doing some real-world stuff and haven't really had time to develop. They did go to public betas, as you already know, which helps them shorten the development cycle. There's no word on the Windows port or the Mac port, although I do understand that the Windows port is fairly well done aside from some sound issues, and that's going to be their next task. Brian's going to try to clean that sound problem up. Other than that, it's been pretty slow in terms of RetroCade. They did add some sound effects, some sound sample support to Armor Attack and Solar Quest. I'll tell you what, if you haven't played Armor Attack with sound, it's a different game altogether. As for Hive, we haven't seen a new version of Hive, I don't think, since the last episode came out, and things have been pretty quiet on the other classic emulator fronts, such as Vice and CCS64. Everything's been fairly quiet. Haven't seen too many new releases. No new release of Handy, the Lynx emulator, which is a shame. That's pretty cool. So that pretty much brings us up to date, and we're going to talk each show a little bit more about what's happening in the news, sort of like what we did with the Empire Strikes Back slapstick bit. Now that we're done with that, I think it's time to get on to the obligatory part of the show, the 8-bit flashback. It's time for an 8-bit flashback. This week's 8-bit flashback is more than just a flashback. And when I say that, I mean that we're going to have a story. Now, I did a little questionnaire, and I've talked to a lot of people. A lot of people says that they listen to Retro Radio, not only for the 8-bit flashback, which I think is cool, but for the stories. Stories of, me breaking that Pac-Man glass, trying to get free credits, those sort of stories. Keeping my poor roommate up till all hours of the night playing Ultimate Wizard on the C64 with the speakers turned towards his wall. This time we got another little story. It's kind of a funny one. It encompasses a couple of different time frames. The 8-bit flashback this week is going to be on the game Frogger. Now, before you go, Frogger, my God, dumbass game. There's something kind of special about Frogger, and it's only around the C64 era that I talk about in general, but this is something even more kind of special. There were a number of different Frogger games released for the C64. I mean, there was like an official port of Frogger. There was Frogger, like Frogger 88, Frogger 2, Frogger 3D, Frogger 93. I mean, there was tons of different versions of Frogger. But there was always one that stuck in my mind. Like the very, very first game I ever got for the C64 was Frogger from Sierra, the same Sierra company that we have today. This is one of their first goodies. And what makes it so memorable, as so many games are memorable, was the music. And we're going to insert a little chunk of music in here for you to hear. just so you can hear exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, see, it's kind of cool, isn't it? It's kind of catchy. You know, when you're talking about one of the early 8-bits, this was like 1982 or 1981, back when, you know, PCs were still green screen and beeping with 8086s. And I remember it so well because the only place I could play this was at Sears. I had a C64, but I couldn't afford a hard drive. We didn't have hard drives back then. I couldn't even afford a 1541 floppy drive. All I had was a data set, one of the cassette recorders. So I remember getting a copy of Frogger, and I was dying to try it out. So I went over to Sears because they had whole. I mean, that was back when Sears owned C64. They had 5 C64s set up, floppy drives, monitors, the whole bit, printers. They were like the C64 outlet. Anyway. So I'd go over there and I'd put the game in and I'd just listen to the music. I mean, it was just amazing. You could just sit there and during the attract mode, as it were, and just listen to the music, just play over and over again. And even the game itself was pretty fun. It runs a lot faster and it's a lot, that's what I'm looking for, crisper than the original Frogger. You know, in the original Frogger at the arcade, for those of you who played it, I know it was a girls' game and guys wouldn't be caught dead playing Frogger. They were off playing Gauntlet or one of these other manly games. Anyway. But the arcade game was really sluggish. You know, you always got your foot caught by the cars. You were leaping to the next lane, that sort of thing. But this Frogger wasn't like that. Very fast-moving, quick pace, not sluggish at all, very responsive. But it was the music, folks, the music that kept me coming back. The interesting side story to go along with this, it got to be before I got a 1541 drive, and that's a whole other story altogether. I'll tell you that on a different show. I got my first one because it's pretty good. I used to spend far too much time over at Sears. I mean, I started getting a collection of games on disc, so I started spending more and more time over there. Well, as I would spend time over there, people would start walking up to me and asking me if I worked there, even though obviously I was too young, but they asked anyway. And so I started telling them what I knew about the C64, and I started giving them demos. And as it's turned out, I started selling more computers than the salespeople did. In fact, the salespeople used to beg me to come back on Saturday nights when they had a lot of traffic that they wanted me to come and, come on, hang out, use the computers. What they're really saying is, hey, make some sales so we get some commission check this month. Those of you who know about, basically the knowledge level of Sears associates will understand completely what I'm talking about. Not all of them. I just don't want to generalize, but a lot of them. Anyway. So I'd spend a lot of time over there playing on their C64s and selling C64s like they were, like they were free. Anyway, sometime later on in life when I was in the Navy, I was temporary active duty reassigned to another school that I wasn't where I lived. It was quite a ways away. It's something I couldn't commute to. I actually had to go up there and basically live in this other town for, 4 or 8 weeks, while I was going to school. Anyway, as it turned out, of course, this is when I was in my Amiga days, and of course I couldn't bring my Amiga with me. You were kind of living out of your sea bag and checking into these little tiny rooms with 5 roommates and all that stuff. So I wasn't going to bring anything along. However, fortunately enough, the Navy Exchange, which is sort of like the on-base department store, happened to carry Amigas, and they had some on demo. Well, I did bring a small collection of discs with me on the off chance I might find somebody that had one that I could maybe go hang with. Well, I was very, very happy to realize that the Exchange had one, so I sat down and started playing games. Lots of games. I had tons of them with me. And several days I got away with hanging out there for hours and hours at a time. And I knew it was too good to last. And in fact, I'd seen this guy walking around that was, obviously security because he'd been around like every single day. And, he did the basic, pretending to look through stuff. He wasn't exactly stealthy, but, you could easily pick him out. Besides, the guy looked like he could kill you by looking at you. And this guy was like 6'4", kind of a husky build. He just had this scowl on his face that would just like make your blood run cold. And he had this big, huge facial scar, which of course made him look like, the devil's own. And I just knew eventually I was going to get this hand on my shoulder, and he was going to kick me out of the store. Well, time went on, and as it turned out, he didn't kick me out, and I started selling Amigas. Yeah, oh, what's this? What's that you're playing there? And they started off with like this huge stack. Within like 3 weeks, I'd sold this whole stack of Amigas. It sounds like I'm boasting here, but it's just a matter of being at the right place at the right time. For any of you who've been in the Navy, who know about Navy exchanges, you know as well as I do, getting sales help, associate help there, impossible. If you don't know what you want when you go there, you don't get what you want. Anyway, so here I am one day. I'm feeling pretty spry now, figuring I'm going to get away with it until I leave. And I've got old Lemmings fired up. And normally I kept the sound really low because I didn't want to attract attention to anybody but maybe a potential customer. Next thing I see is the guy walk by, and I'm like holding my breath every time he does. And all of a sudden he pokes his head around the corner and scowls at me. I'm like, okay, this is it. It's time to pack up the bags. A good thing is over. And all of a sudden his face softens, and it's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's amazing, the change in this guy's face. And he looks at me, he's like, is that Lemmings? I mean, you could have just knocked me over with a feather. He comes over and he's like, oh, what level are you on? And hence became this huge friendship between the two of us. We started playing Lemmings. We started playing Lemmings together, and he invited me back home to dinner with the family, and we played Amiga games until like 3 in the morning, and I went to school at like 5, so I didn't do very well in that school. But it was really funny, the friends you might meet while you're just, you think you're going to get caught and thrown out of the store. I thought that was kind of an interesting story. Anyway, back to Frogger. Like I said, there were many different versions of Frogger. The Sierra Frogger, graphically, I guess, wasn't anything exciting, but it did hold to the original Frogger theme. And if you've been watching your screen, you'll have seen some Frogger screenshots going by, and they'll probably be repeating as time goes on. I mean, how much can you show about Frogger? It's basically the same thing. But the music was really nice. It was a really great game, and it's very hard to find this version of Frogger on the net. There's about 5 different other Froggers that you can find anytime you want. I mean, just pick a C64 site and they've got it. But the Sierra Frogger is very difficult to come by. In fact, I had to find it on a tape collection, and I finally figured out which one it was, and I got it retrieved, and I dumped it to a disk image. And the disk image will be available with the show archive in the archives area. That's what I'm going to start doing from now on. Once the show gets archived, the ROMs will be available. Of course, anyway, that's going to wrap up this 8-bit flashback. In the final notes of the show, I'd like to talk to you about a sort of special event that's coming up. This is a blatant plug. You can put your blatant plug sound effects and screens here. This August 10th to be exact, is the 1 year anniversary of Retro Radio. And we've got a lot of shows, and a lot of people have asked, is there any way that I could get all of these on a CD or something sent to me? Because there's a lot of data, and I don't want to download all the back episodes. Understand completely what you mean. And up until just a few weeks ago, I wasn't really sure that I was going to do anything like that. But I went ahead and decided that I think it would be cool to actually make a commemorative 1 year anniversary Retro Radio CD-ROM. And a lot of people are like, yeah, just dump the episodes on there and we'll take it. But, to me that's kind of half-assed. I'd like to see something kind of special. So that's what I'm putting together. Hopefully we'll be done in time for the 1 year. I'd like to ship the first CDs out on August 10th. There will be a page up off Monroe World that you can order from, and you'll be able to. I'll be taking pre-orders once I'm absolutely sure that the interface is done. I don't want anyone sending me any cash or any payment until after I'm absolutely positive that the project is close enough to being complete that there's no way that it's not going to ship. I don't do that bleem vaporware crap, okay? The product will be ready to go before I accept pre-orders. Right now, I think the cost is going to be $9.95 U.S., and that will be delivered. So that will cover the cost of a CD, the cost of delivery, and a couple of dollars for my time to burn the CDs and to develop the interface and all that stuff. It'll be a professional-looking interface. It's going to be all nice point and click. There's going to be extras on the CD, maybe some things that never been seen anywhere else, part of Retro Radio's illustrious year-long past. So there'll be a lot of surprises. I may divulge some of them, or maybe all of them. Probably put a couple of Easter eggs on the CD to give you guys something to do while you're listening to the shows. Anyway, like I said, the pre-ordering will happen pretty soon once I'm sure. I've almost got the interface designed. So once I've got that and I get a couple of the episodes working, I'll feel much better about taking pre-orders. There's about 300 megs of shows, folks. That's Real Player G2 and a few MPEG versions that were made, MP3 versions that were made. There's going to be a bunch of other stuff on there, a bunch of other goodies, of course. And I look forward to bringing this to you. I've had a lot of people ask about it, and I appreciate you coming forth and saying that you're interested, and I'm hoping that this will take care of you. They will be burns. They will be homemade burned CDs. So if your CD-ROM drive has problems with that, that's something you want to take into consideration before you order. I just don't think there's going to be enough that it'd be warranted for me to go out and pay a disc duplicator to make 1,000 of them. Just don't think that'd quite be cost effective. But anyway, so if that's something to think about, and you will be seeing more of that on Monroe World, and hopefully there'll be one more episode of Retro Radio out to make that CD before it's all over. Anyway, well, we're gonna go ahead and cut the show off. I'm glad you guys tuned in. I'm sorry it's been so long. Hopefully we'll have our interview with the next show with David Foster over at Digital Leisure. He's agreed to a phone conversation, which we'll go ahead and record, and we'll do all that fancy digital hoopla on here, and we'll get the show on. And hopefully Buckner Garcia will do their show for us as well. Anyway, until the next time, folks, my name is Shane R. Monroe, and until the next episode of Retro